Tim Adams. So I propose that we start the meeting as of now, please. Linda, will you sort of take over for the moment, please? Or is it for me? I suppose it's for me. Have we got any? So this is the full licensing committee meeting on Monday, the 23rd of November, 2020. To receive apologies for absence, please.
We just have Councillor Adams, Chairman.
Fine, thank you. Item 2, any public questions?
No questions submitted, just Mr. Heales, who I think is speaking a bit further down the agenda.
Understand, thank you very much. Minutes to approve as a correct record, the minutes. Now, this is going to be quite interesting in that not all of us attended all the different subcommittees. So I'm assuming we'll take the vote or potentially the approval of the people who attended just those subcommittee meetings is how I think that should go. Is that correct or not? Or do we do it en bloc? Or maybe any advice on that, please?
Is this for the minutes of the subcommittee? Sorry, I was just dealing with someone in the waiting room. I think.
Sorry. Yes, it's to do with the appeals committee held on the 20th and the meetings of the licensing subcommittee held on the 29th of January, 25th Feb, 25th of March, 6th of May, 17th of June and 5th of August. How do we approach that?
I think the main committee, if you can all approve it, and then Linda, are you able to give some advice around how you deal with the hearings, please?
Sorry, I've been having trouble with the mute. Yes, could you just take the subcommittees individually, and obviously if people were there, they can vote on them. Otherwise, you know, just
okay. So dealing with so we might as well go through the paperwork here on page 1. A licensing and appeals committee which was held on the 20th of January. Myself, Harry, Pete Fisher, Nigel H, Georgina, John and Emma and Andreas were present. Do you have any comment on those minutes? Do you approve those minutes? Yeah, okay, so those minutes are approved. Going on to the next bit, there was the licensing subcommittee also on the 29th of January. Harry was present, Georgina and Andreas. Do you approve of those or any comments on those? Harry approves. Georgina, do you approve? Yeah, and Andreas, wherever. Andreas, do you approve of those? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, it's just licensing subcommittee meeting on the 25th of February this year. Pauline, Pete Fisher and Emma Spagnola. Any comment on those? Peter approves. Do you approve? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Those are approved. Subcommittee meeting on the 25th of March of this year. Nigel, myself and Harry all approve with those. Yeah, I approve. Thank you very much. I don't know where Nigel. Licensing subcommittee meeting on the 6th of May this year. Myself, Nigel Lloyd and John Rest, who was partly substitute because I had terrible internet connection. Yeah, all approved there, John? Yeah. Nigel, thank you. Licensing subcommittee on the 17th of June. That was Harry, Andreas and Duncan. Do you all approve of those? Thank you very much indeed. Morning, Hammer.
Morning, sorry I'm a bit late to the meeting.
It's all right, it's no problem. Subcommittee meeting 5th of August. Nigel H, Emma Spagnola and Pauline. Do you approve of those? Okay, got nodding heads there, thank you. And that's it for those are all the minutes approved for those. Thank you very much indeed, guys. Moving on to item 4, items of urgent business. Are there any?
None,
Linda,
Chair.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. Number 5, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? I understand Andres knows Stephen Hales, and I've also been lobbied by him, but yes. And yes, Pauline?
Yes, I know Steve Heals through
Yes, Steve Hales. Yeah. So do I, and I accept, yeah, Andres, I know you do as well. It's not a problem there, Andres.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not a problem there, Emma, either. Anybody else got any other items of interest? Declarations of interest? Right. Item 6, update on general licensing issues. Is that for you, Lara, please?
Lara's been having some trouble connecting, Chair. I can see she's sort of joined the meeting twice.
Right.
Just going to see if she can't get her video to work, so I'm just hoping she can unmute. There she is.
Morning, Lara. If you feel uncomfortable with your video on, I'll accept that you will just have your name showing, please. You're on mute, Lara.
I had to do it I'm having to log in via my mobile rather than my computer because the computer won't show video.
Right, it's not a problem. It doesn't matter if not having video. I'm quite happy with you to be behind your name if that makes it more comfortable and more easier and more reliable on the net. Okay,
I'll log back in via the computer then, just so that my mobile doesn't die. So you might get pictures, you might not. We'll see how it works.
No, it doesn't matter. I said I'm happy with you with just seeing your name.
Okay,
thank you. And whilst we're waiting for Lara to come, oh, she's back in. Just to let you know, as Lara's signing in, we've got the unusual step of having the leader of the Association of Taxi Drivers to give us a 5-minute presentation on his view of the handbook, and he'll have his colleague will also just be in attendance, and also one other of the largest taxi companies who does not belong to the association will also be in attendance. So I hope you guys don't object to that. Thank you.
Lara's just rejoining now, Chair.
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Lara, are you able to unmute on your laptop so we can hear you?
Right, can you hear us? Can you speak, Lara? See if we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you now.
It looks like I'm going to end up doing it on both phone and computer, but hey, we'll try and get it to work.
Okay, so we're on item 6, update on general licensing issues, please.
Do you know what page that is on, please?
Yeah, hang on a moment. I was just reading it off the off my minutes.
It's an oral update, Chairman.
Oh, it said, yeah, thank you. Yes, indeed it is. It's an oral update on licensing issues.
We the only thing that we've got going through at the moment as general issue, it appears to be business as usual through COVID. We're still getting majority of applications are coming through online, where most people are managing to pay. It is very much business as usual. As you're well aware of, part of the agenda item today, we've got the task and finish group hopefully will approve the policy and handbook that's going through. Other than that, it's just generally business as usual.
Thank you. And there's no any sort of pressing issues or anything else like that then?
Not that I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay, that's good news then. Right, let's go on to item 7. And Emma, if you can allow Steve Heels and Mr. Bale into the...
Yes, I'm letting them in now, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, morning, gentlemen. I'll just wait for user 1 to connect to audio. Or to, in fact, both of them to connect to audio. Both of them to connect to audio. Can someone, can user 1 and Steve please put themselves on mute, please, because they're getting feedback. Right, we're dealing now with that. We're dealing now with license 7, which is the licensing update. Firstly, I have to thank the licensing team. I also have to thank the task and finish group who've been working on this handbook for quite a considerable period of time. I think significant progress has been made. It's quite a technical document, and what I would like to do in the first instance is we're starting with a clean sheet as of today. Any historical aspects that have gone on we can ignore, and I'd like to allow Steve Heels just to give us up to 5 minutes overview on his view with regards the handbook. Steve is the head of the North Norfolk Taxi Association, which actually covers 50% of all the taxi drivers within North Norfolk. The other 50%, no, 49%, he's probably 51%. The other 49% have not joined the association and are independent, either one-man bands or 2 cars, with the exception of Elite, who is Mr. Bale, who is also on the call. So that just gives you a little bit of background. And Steve, can you now just give us your overview, please? Can you come off mute, Steve, please?
Is that right?
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you, Pierre, and good morning, councillors. North Norfolk Taxi and Private Hire Association have reviewed the proposed taxi handbook and have compared it with the West Norfolk handbook and listened to our members before compiling the report. the association's reports highlight that there is more than a passing similarity to the West Norfolk Handbook, with only 22 out of 360 paragraphs being exclusive to North Norfolk. The report also makes observations and suggests amendments that allows the council to continue to put public safety first, whilst not adding additional financial burden to the trade that is already suffering financially due to the pandemic, with no signs of recovery in the near future. Many operators have seen all their long distance bookings cancelled and a drop in their daytime trade as their elderly customers try to shield. We have expressed a desire to enter into talks for various changes, and it has long been promised, even before this administration, that talks would take place. We believe the account of events in January about the initial release of the draft document are not as accurate as they could be for clarity. The taxi trade feels the timing of the release of the handbook shows a lack of empathy towards them, given that it has been many years in the making. And we have sent emails to councillors expressing our concerns since November 19. Questions must be asked about the benefit of this email consultation, as it appears to have received about a 7% response. However, it does allow the council to say they followed due process. We represent about 50% of the licensed drivers and operators in North Norfolk, includes the majority of operators, large operators. Strongly believe that because this was only sent out by email, there are people who haven't received the consultation, either because they don't have computers or because email addresses held by the council are no longer current. The report highlights 27 changes that were not included on the feedback form. Whilst the draft handbook was made available to read, it would be a fair assumption that the comments form covered all the changes. It is felt that this was misleading and hasn't allowed for an accurate consultation response. Unless you were familiar with the current handbook or spent time comparing it with the existing one, as I have done, it would be hard to know what has changed. There are sections that, whilst the rule hasn't changed, they've been expanded on. The proposed new handbook now covers 58 pages, as opposed to the current one has 34. The new handbook also omits the final page that covers procedure for Hackney carriage fare increases. We feel that if the council want people to know the handbook, then have fewer pages and fewer rules, making it easier to retain the information. I'd like to remind everybody that best practice in 2010 states the duty of a council is to put policies in place that safeguard the general public, but should not be so onerous or cost prohibitive as to lessen the number of taxis available, thus putting the general public at a greater risk. We're aware that drivers and operators who have already stopped driving or trading, and I'm sure there will be more due to the pandemic. Whilst it's accepted the current handbook needs updating, some changes will add to the drivers and operators' expenses. A £76 taxi test requires approximately £200 in takings, but an average fare locally of about £3.50. That's a lot of extra work per vehicle. And some sections, the rules which need to be clarified to avoid people making errors. The more rules there are, the more there is to get wrong. Our report highlights that we would like to discuss before the committee passes the handbook. We therefore request that councillors do not pass the handbook today until discussions have taken place with officers and councillors to address the issues, and afterwards, hopefully, allow it to move forward to the final stages with the blessing of both parties, as happened with the handbook in 2012. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Heels. I will allow you to both, you and Mr. Bale, to actually stay on the call for you to listen to our discussions. If members of the licensing committee do not object. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Lara, I'd like you to sort of talk us through some of this as well, please, and then I'll open it up to the members of the committee, please. So is Lara there? She's probably having problems. Oh, right, she can't unmute now. Okay, then whilst Lara's trying to get in, are there any questions or observations that the committee has, please? Okay, right, I'll start off with, I'll start off with Georgina, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my initial observation is that it sounds entirely reasonable that in the interest of transparency, we would actually have that discussion between officers, councillors and the taxi professionals. If there's any doubts about the consultation, I think that's quite important.
Thank you. Emma Spagnola.
I'm actually going to echo just what Georgie said. I've seen a few things in the report that I'd like to be clarified with regards to disability, particularly, which won't be a surprise to many of you. So I do believe that we need to sit down and have that conversation as well. I think, in the long run, this is these people's livelihoods, and they've just come in the middle of a really awful time for their businesses. And although some are businesses, some are single people just doing it on their own, self-employed, which would probably missed out on some of the money that was due to come to businesses. So I really think that at this point, it's not a very wise idea to have make a decision on people's livelihoods. Okay, thank you. Lara, I'm going to get you to come in a moment. I'll just finish off with a couple more of the councillors' observations and comments. Andreas, I've seen you, Duncan, next. Andreas, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been listening very carefully to the speech by Mr. Hills. Thank you very much. And I've actually jotted down, as we have been speaking, some of the main points that were raised. Obviously, the drop in daytime and the current situation and the difficulties. It only seems fair, reasonable to me that this discussion goes through.
Okay, thank you. Duncan, and then I'll go back to Lara because I feel slightly that we've put the cart before the horse here, but anyhow, please, Duncan, will you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it is absolutely right and incumbent upon us all to think very carefully. Yes, I understand that the policy originally became effective quite a while ago, and it is only right to have updates to that and reviews. But we must not underestimate that at the moment, making changes to businesses which have suffered enormously and to be seen effectively potentially being rather bureaucratic and layering of red tape. At this moment in time, Mr. Chairman, we have to be very mindful about that. There's lots of businesses, there's lots of situations, whether it's Ofsted school inspections or more bureaucracy and implementations to be put into the business environment. Many times people have turned around and said, look, we understand that these procedures have to potentially be discussed, but actually we are in completely unprecedented times. And we really should be looking at our business, especially our taxi drivers have suffered, as we heard from Mr. Heels. And I just wonder if a gentle handbrake, pardon the pun, should be applied at this point in time, just because they really don't need to have some of this compliance layered on top of them for the moment. Now, whether Lara can talk to us about what that sort of delay could look like if the committee felt that way, but it's just that I'm just very, very nervous about doing anything to harm people's livelihoods at this moment in time. So it's just a gentle warning. I'm mindful of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Duncan. I hear what you're saying. I'd like to hear Lara's observations and views, and I have a proposal that I would like to put forward, but let's hear what Lara has as observations and views, please. Lara?
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. The handbook has been being looked at for probably just over a year now. We've had meetings, there's been consultations, there's been a task and finish group, that, you know, this handbook hasn't been, it's taken a while to get to this point, shall we say. In July 2020, the Department for Transport brought out a statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards, which we as a local authority must have regard to. It's written via the DFT that we have to implement the statutory standards within 6 months of them coming into force. So that's something that we need to be mindful of, that there are additional things that we as an authority have to bear in mind, and we have to have regard to, that weren't in our policy. So if you wanted to put a soft handbrake on the policy coming into now, that's something that you'd need to bear in mind, that the Department for Transport have released this statutory guidance that we must have regard to. So, you know, putting a soft handbrake on it now wouldn't be too much of an issue, but it would just reset the whole process as a time frame that you set as a committee.
Thank you. Is any additional observations, or could I put forward a sort of a proposal that, oh, sorry, Nigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lara, can I just ask Lara a question, and perhaps Mr. Heels? In the context of COVID, what is the current rate of change and requirements on taxi drivers, given the differences in tiers, in lockdowns and everything else? Because this situation is clearly going to drag on well into the new year, and I accept that we've got to take into account the Department for Transport requirements, but if they are somehow subsumed by the COVID crisis, we actually need to be looking at the requirements on taxi drivers in parallel with that, and then in parallel with what we've got to do in terms of the handbook.
In my role, I've read through a lot of the legislation, and as it stands at the moment, COVID has affected taxi drivers, but it hasn't affected the way they work directly from the government, because they were a group of people that could still continue to work because they couldn't work from home. They were never specifically mentioned in any legislation that they couldn't work, that they were a business that had to close. There has been extra things put upon them, such as the recommendation, although it was never made mandatory, that they had to wear face masks. There were recommendations that there were extra things fitted to vehicles if they so wished, such as screens between the front seats and the rear seats to protect the passengers, extra cleaning of vehicles. The thing that has, I think, affected them more than anything is the lack of people that are moving around. And that's due to more people working from home, less people moving around due to there being lockdowns. We're now in lockdown too. It's that there's less work out there, not that they're prevented from working, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it wasn't quite so much the work, it was more the regulations that are placed on the taxi drivers. Can I just ask Mr. Heels, in the context of the drivers that you represent, what is the significant on-cost that they've had to incur in dealing with passengers in the COVID situation?
Obviously, after each customer has left the car, certainly with ourselves, we're looking at the drivers then wiping down all the surfaces to make sure that they've been anti-bac. We must remember there are some drivers that have underlying health conditions that don't prevent them from driving, but may prevent them from actually wanting to take the risk. We have been recognised, the taxi trade, as a high risk group of essential workers. and that mustn't be forgotten. So there are people that have already not been able to continue working because of their own concerns. As we all know, Norfolk has a high percentage of elderly people, and they form a large part of the daytime trade across North Norfolk. And consequently, a lot of that has gone because a lot of them are choosing to shield, quite rightly. And obviously with the lockdowns, then there's been no evening trade to help. I've got friends in the trade that specialise in long distance work. That's all they do is long distance, and their entire diary has been wiped out. This year, I was showing a 3% increase on long distance work, which was really promising. My diary is now empty. So it's not just about the additional costs that have been imposed by buying cleaning materials. I have 6 vehicles, so you multiply everything up by 6, you know, along with the things the drivers need to provide them with. It's all additional costs. And it's a very difficult time. And the government have actually, they recognise that there are businesses that have fallen through the grant schemes, and I draw your attention to the additional grants that was released, and government asked councils to pay particular attention to whether they could give any of those grants to some of the businesses that weren't legally entitled to the grants because they were able to continue trading, but they suffered severe financial loss even though they did. So yeah, and I just do take pick up on the point that Lara made about the handbook being worked on for over 12 months. In actual fact, we know this handbook has actually been in the frame for about the last 4 years. It's not 12 months, it's 4 years we've been chasing for this handbook, because we were always promised by our previous officers and Steve Hems at previous meetings that talks would be ending.
Steve.
Yeah, okay, Steve. It's just
yeah, Steve, we hear what you're saying. I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm just cutting across there. We agreed that.
Sorry, Pierre.
Go on, Nigel.
Steve, that
Nigel.
was fine. That was the context I needed. I'm fully aware that obviously the trade is down, and I just needed to understand what other requirements are just sitting there so that we can take a look in the question about dealing with the handbook as it stands today. But thank you for that.
Anybody else wants to chip in? Yes, John Rest, please.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions, please. Maybe Lara can clarify. First of all, Lara, can you clarify that the current handbook is 8 years old, the one that they're using? Is there an immovable timescale when the next books have to be done by, no matter what people agree on? And the other point is, maybe the other operators could tell me, are they getting any restrictions from their insurance companies on their taxis because they're running on an 8-year-old handbook? Thank you.
To answer those questions, John, the handbook, the last handbook that went through full council went through in 2012. So yes, it is 8 years
correct.
old.
Yeah.
As for insurance companies restricting people, I don't believe they are. People are being insured for hire and reward for either public hire or private hire, depending on what they drive. And it's an agreement between them and their insurance company as to what their premium is. And as for an immovable time frame, the handbook is constantly being looked at by us officers. It wasn't deemed that there was many changes to be made in 2015-18, so it's not been updated since. And it was subsequent to 2018 that it was decided that the taxi and handbook would need to be updated within the next sort of few years, which is where we're at now.
Thank you, Lara. Christopher Cushing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I endorse everything that's been said by our fellow councillors in terms of, and yourself in terms of, perhaps put, as I think as Duncan described, putting a handbrake on there. What I'd be interested to know is, we've got a summary, I think, in our pack of the changes which are being proposed, but I'd be interested to know if you do the sort of a review of the consultation, is what are being driven by new legislation, so effectively what are mandatory. I'd also be interested to know what Mr. Heels, what makes their life more difficult and is going to add additional costs in, which may be in the area where we do have some discretion. So take the point. Clearly, as a committee, we want to make sure that people who use this taxi service, it's very safe for them, but overall, we want to actually encourage the business they actually have. Thank you.
Yeah, I've seen you, Nigel Lloyd, I've seen you. Laura, do you want to answer that, or Mr. Heels?
With regards,
Laura, please. Laura first, and then Mr. Heels, please.
Okay. As for additional costs, the only things that I can see that would bring in additional costs is if you're operating with vehicles over 5 years old. We're now requesting that they have a mid-term vehicle inspection. There is a request to have a safeguarding qualification, which would possibly incur an extra cost. Being a member of the DBS update service would not be an extra cost as long as you kept it up to date. It would be £13 a year instead of £52.50, I think it is, every 3 years. Other than that, off the top of my head, I can't actually think of anything that would incur an extra cost. I mean, if Mr. Heels would like to correct me on that, I'm quite happy for that.
Mr. Heels?
I'm inclined to agree with Laura, which she'll probably be thumping the air with. They do appear to be the main issues. Obviously, I've been through the books.
I've seen you, Pauline. Okay, thank you. Nigel Lloyd, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say a couple of things, really. I'd like to thank Lara for the clarifications she's given this morning and for running the consultation. I'm sorry to hear Mr. Heels didn't feel it was captured everyone, but we have had a significant number of responses to the consultation, as you can see in your packs. And I would say there's two main issues that jumped out to me from the feedback we received from taxi operators. The first was about the knowledge test, and I think that there might be some misunderstandings about that, because I think, this is my view, that when there's a very arduous test in London, central London especially, which is quite difficult to achieve. But I think this, the way we call this knowledge, it's all about being able to communicate with passengers, to be numerate, to work out fares, etc., and to have a basic knowledge of the communities which we serve. So I don't think it's, looking at some of the comments from taxi operators, it's not this very arduous test that takes months of research to pass. I'm pretty certain, but Lara can please challenge me on that. The second issue that jumped out to me from the feedback was the 6-monthly tests on vehicles. I believe currently it's annual MOT tests. And I can see that that would be a burden on taxi operators. But I would also say that, our duty in this committee is to follow the statutory guidance. We have no choice about those matters that come from above, if you like. We just have to conform with those. And we also, I don't need to tell you this, but we also have a huge responsibility to our residents who expect to be driven in cars that are fit for purpose, with drivers that are certified and DBS trained and all those things that we know about on this committee. I would support, and finally, I don't want to hog the limelight here, but I would support a little bit more consultation with Mr. Heels, as is requested. I think that's good. I mean, this has to go through Cabinet, it has to go through full council. That's a process that's going to take at least a couple of months, even if we start the clock running from today, I think. Again, challenge me on that. And I'm hoping that by the time we implement this, things might be a little bit better with regard to COVID. And so a very short delay, probably not a bad idea considering the strain the industry's under at the moment. Thanks for listening.
Just hold on, Mr. Heels. Pauline, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have a duty of care. We have a duty of care to our residents and also to our taxi drivers. They have a very difficult job. I wouldn't like to be one. Personally, Mr. Heels and I have had discussions about protection for taxi drivers, female taxi drivers, etc. I feel that COVID has had really quite a dramatic effect on their business. It has. It's reduced, as Mr. Heels said in his presentation, their traffic quite significantly. The other thing I'd like to know is how much are the statutory yearly costs? How much do they add up to for taxi drivers? Because we're saying they have to do this. Everything that they do or asked to do costs. So has anybody got any ideas, Lara or Mr. Heels or you, Pierre, how much these yearly costs mount up to for each taxi driver, or if they don't pay themselves personally, for their company? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let you answer that first, Mr. Heels, and then I'll go back to Lara, please.
Thank you, Pierre. The drivers have a cost of it's £170 every 3 years that they have to find for the actual driver's licence, and that was changed in 2012 with an annual renewal. They also have to have a medical every 6 years for the council. That's again was changed from 3 yearly to 6 yearly with full council in 2012. Prior to that change, it was just when you first got your licence, and then not again until you were about 60, 65. And those costs can be quite different. We managed to negotiate an association with Munsley Medical Practice a few years ago, a medical for taxi drivers for £80. They've now stopped that offer now, unfortunately, but you can pay, drivers pay up to £137 for a medical, and then Chrome are charging £127. So it's quite a disparity, and this is one of the things that we have highlighted in our report as well. You've also got the DBS check, which is currently every 3 years, and unless you're registered with the electronic update, which I encourage everybody to do, then that costs you £54 every 3 years. As Lara said earlier, if you register with the electronic update, it's £13 a year after your initial check. But then, of course, if you're an owner driver or an operator, you then have £76 for a taxi vehicle test. You then have £140 per year for renewing your licence on the vehicle, which again, through negotiations, we managed to have a 2-tier structure with that one, whereby the initial test is or initial application is 149, I believe, and that includes your taxi plate on the back of the car. But we managed to negotiate to have the rear plate made into a perpetual plate. The date with the expiry date was removed. So that means that operators saved some money in subsequent years after that, provided they didn't need a new plate. It brought it down to, I think it was £130 now. So we can work with the council, and we aren't saying that these rules and regulations don't need updating and changing. What we are saying, and we realise all this about the statutory guidance, what we're saying is that this is not the time to bring them in, because any additional costs, as I said earlier on, £76 for a taxi test. All right, doesn't sound a lot, but when you've got to make £200 extra per car to take that, if you've got 3 cars, that's £600 extra in takings, you know, and it soon adds up, and the work isn't there, and we don't know when it's coming back.
Thank you, Mr. Heels. Lara, have you any additional information to add to that, please?
Pierre, I was just working out some sort of annual costs.
Okay.
As Mr. Heels said, for an initial vehicle with a plate, which the plates last anything between 3 and 5 years, it's £149, which is an annual fee. If you renewing without a plate, it's £130. Your driver's license is £173, and that lasts for 3 years, which is an annual cost of £57.66. Your DBS lasts for 3 years, and that's a cost of £52, which gives you an annual cost of £17.33. As Mr. Heel said, there are 4 test stations, approved garages that we use, and their costs do differ slightly depending on which one you use, but on average we'll use Mr. Heel's cost of £76. That again is an annual cost at the moment. If you're an operator, so i.e. you have private hire vehicles within your fleet, you also have to have an operator's license. Now the cost for that is £153, but that license lasts for 5 years, so that gives you an annual cost of £30.60. So if you add all of those up, which I haven't actually managed to do yet, that's what your annual costs are, without anything being added to them.
£329.
Thank you very much. And obviously on top of that, they've got to have their insurance, which depending on what their insurance record is, who they insure with, how many vehicles they've got in their fleet would depend on what their insurance costs are. That's between them and their insurance company. That's not something that we as an authority have any jurisdiction over. We just have to make sure that they're appropriately insured.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. I was interested in that.
Yeah. Harry.
Yeah, just a quick question for Hema. Hema, what legal wriggle room have we got if we are following the legislation as it stands at the moment in updating? Do we actually have a window to put on a soft handbrake?
That's not something that I can say conclusively, but what I can do is go back and research that and then come back to the committee with the relevant information.
Thank you, Hema. I think we ought to take that on board.
Yeah, no, understand. I still have an idea which I'd like to put forward to the committee anyhow. Duncan, please.
Just to say, Mr. Chairman, I just wonder if it's fair at all of Mr. Heels to make some. We've heard about bookings down, and we understand that. Is there any sort of anecdotal evidence that you can just inform the committee of on what your income levels have dropped by over the last 9 months? I think that would probably shape a number of members of the committee. We all know that we are in a constituency with an older demographic. You might have had a decent-ish summer with the domestic tourism market we've had, but certainly my experience of talking to other taxi drivers, it's been very tough across the whole of the round. Just a sort of a rough what has the level of incomes dropped by. And just to say, Mr. Chairman, I did a little bit of research on this, and the the licensing regulations sit under, as you're quite right, the Department of Transport under Baroness Veer. I know Baroness Veer relatively well. If the committee decides, I'm more than happy to try and ask for a reasonably swift answer from Baroness Veer about what what the priorities are with this, and if a slight stay before the policy is implemented is, I can certainly help facilitate that around the government.
Thank you. Mr. Heels?
Thank you. Well, there are two examples, well, three examples I can use. Is for myself, between the lockdown starting, and as I say, I've had all my private hire bookings cancelled out, and that's work that I do for schools and things like that. I'm looking at a loss of income at the moment of around about £30,000. I know that I've got a friend, as I said earlier on, who does long distance work, and he's doing the airports on average, probably 4 or 5 times a week. He's lost all his bookings. He hasn't got any booking. He's got the odd one to a hospital like Cambridge or London, but overall he's lost all those bookings. And I was talking to a local taxi driver only a couple of weeks ago, and he said it's awful. He said he had the telephone on for 12 hours the other day, he said, and he took £75. He said it is down so much, it's just there's just nobody around.
Thank you, Mr. Hills. That's, I just wanted to get an idea. Thank you. That's very kind.
Mr. Bale, being an independent, not being in the association, what observations do you have with regards loss of income? I know majority of your work is school runs, but you still do some private airport work. No, obviously Mr. Bale doesn't hear me. Or on Mr. Bale, do you want to answer? If you come off mute. No. He might come in later on.
Tracy Howard, the Public Protection and Commercial Manager, would like to speak.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see the hand there.
That's
Good morning,
right.
Tracy.
Morning, Pierre and everybody. I'm really sorry that I joined late. It's technology issues, but I'm on my phone, so you'll have to excuse me. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. It's just to make an overall comment, really, that I do think, I've inherited and come into the council while this policy was still in its planning process, and went to committee earlier in the year with this to consult. And I do think legally the consultation process has been followed, and we have had some really valid comments come back from the trade. Now, I appreciate if there are observations that comments have been made by the association that now want to be heard because they come in through a different route, then there's an opportunity there to sort of revisit that, and I think that's appropriate in this case. But what I don't think is appropriate is to open up the consultation to the trade again and to reconsult if that's something that's going to be considered. And just to comment, that these standards that are coming in are statutory. In some local authorities, these standards and approaches have been in place for quite a long time. And back in 2007, I was a licensing manager up in the Northwest. We had the knowledge test for taxi drivers that were applying for licenses in that authority. But, just to reassure the trade as well that we as an authority have a duty to keep costs down and to be efficient with the way that we set the fees for drivers. And if there are any new mechanisms that are coming in, we will look at, engaging with them and local facilitators to allow that to happen. So an example for the knowledge test is we could use and enable a local education institution to do that. So local college or a trainer that put things out to tender, we could do that to try and keep the costs down. So the finer details not been worked out, but in principle, these standards are to protect the public and our communities, and we do sympathise with the trade. So if we are going to put the handbrake on very softly, then maybe we should do that very short term. I wouldn't want to propose the new handbook being finalised by later than the 1st of April next year. I think that would be a reasonable time period as a suggestion, because then we're not going into another year and things dragging on, and we can make us sit down and take action where we need to. Just some comments there. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Bale, obviously I've
Hello. I think you've mistaken me for Mr. Bale. I'm actually
sorry.
Cole. I'm actually Cole.
Sorry, Mr. Coles.
I'm Mr. Coleman.
Yep.
I'm the chairperson of the Taxi Association. I'm not Mr. Bales.
Sorry, I apologise.
That's okay. I'm just listening in to all the conversations. I'm actually semi-retired now, but from all our members, everybody is suffering terribly through this situation at the moment. And the handbook, I was asked to go in for discussion of the new handbook nearly 4 years ago when Gemma was involved. We should have had consultation. We've tried to have consultation over the last 4 years over this.
No, understand what I'm trying to say now. We're starting off with a clean slate as of today. So I hear what's, that's in the past. So we're now trying to look forward.
Can I just add something about the costs?
Yes, please.
I can give you two. I think one is they want standard roof signs on the vehicles, all of them to be standard, which is quite a hard task. It could be done over a year, but how that's going to cost everybody or a lot of people money right from the start. Also, as far as the 2 tests a year is concerned, we have a solution to that as an association, which could still give 2 tests and still give the reliability on the vehicles, but with only 1 council test and 1 MOT test. Whereas at the moment, most people, when they buy a new car, they get the car MOT'd and have the council test at the same time. If the council test is carried out 6 months initially, and then an MOT carried out 6 months afterwards, that means every 6 months a vehicle's tested, which will save an operator a test. That's all I wanted to say. I wasn't going to be involved in this conversation, but I'm very concerned about the trade.
Okay, thank you very much for your observation. Mr. Heels.
Thank you. I would just like to clarify the situation with regards to the consultation. I did in my statement say that it had only received a response of about 7%, and 2 members have said that they felt they had a good response. In reality, I counted up the number of responses and it came to 20. That's 20 responses out of a possible somewhere between 260 and 300 licensed drivers, which is a really poor response. And also when you look at those responses, a lot of them are actually asking questions that they've come back to me and said, we never had an answer. And I had to point out that this was a consultation and it was for them to make comments, not ask questions. But a lot of those consultation report forms that were sent back were asking questions. There's one that sticks in my mind from John Collins at Parkside. Big question marks in the comments box. What about this? What about that? This is why we need to have a consultation, discussions with the council, so I can go back to my members with clarity of what's going to happen and that, it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg. But please
understand
20 out of nearly 300. That's not very.
No, I hear what you're saying. Anybody else got any other comments? What I would like to do, therefore, is I put a proposal to the committee and see what you think about this. That we approve the handbook as it is today, but then a part of the task and finish group and any other member of the committee who would like to join would then hold a meeting with Mr. Heels to discuss the more finer points of the handbook where he feels or we feel that there are some gaps or some improvements. And then before then any agreements that would be made between the trade and ourselves would then be added as an addendum to the handbook, which then would go to full council in December. So therefore we could then get the handbook approved at December's council meeting. Any comments on that? Right, let's start with Georgie, please. Yep, yep.
Why would we approve it now? I thought we were going to put a handbrake on it. I don't think I'd be able to support that, Pierre.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is it would be a sort of handbrake in that what I was trying to say was that we would approve it today, but the handbrake would be the discussion with the trade to change any of the to improve the handbook and then get that ready for council. But if nobody, that's what I was trying to say. Mr. Birch.
Yeah, Pierre, I think that, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a really good idea. I think we need to get on with this now. That would be some progress and that would put the end in sight. So I think it's a very good idea and I would certainly support it.
Okay, Pauline?
Yes, I agree. The basic premise of the handbook is okay. It's the queries that we need to sort out. And I agree with Don. We've got to get on with this. It's been hanging around for quite some time. It's not fair to the trade and it's not fair to the licensing. So I would just support your proposal, Pierre.
Okay, Andreas.
Just to clarify that if we support it today, that the additional meeting will take place?
Yes, it will. I was hoping to hold it sometime this week,
right?
So we can get things going on.
So it will be quick, wouldn't it? It won't drag on.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm hoping. Harry.
For December council, is that a little bit ambitious? Do you think it could be put back to the following council so we can take? There's quite a lot to take on board. I mean, it's not just simple issues, and I'm just worried that aiming for December council as we're in late November, it might be a little bit ambitious.
Harry, we don't have another council meeting until February. There isn't one in January.
Oh, right. In that case, no, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Andreas?
I would suggest we carry on with your suggestion, Pierre.
Okay, Mr. Heels. Oh, sorry, I'll come back to you, Duncan, in a moment. Yeah, I've seen your hand. Mr. Heels. You're on mute.
Sorry, technology. My only concern with you actually passing the handbook today is that, in theory, we could have negotiations and it could be a situation whereby you pay us lip service and carry on regardless, because you've given us the meeting and there's nothing we can do about it now because you've already passed it. Whereas if we have discussions, I mean, there are actually, I counted up, there's actually 80 changes that we've highlighted on the report that we did, and based on the comments of members earlier, it would be much appreciated if this could be delayed to its implementation of something like the 1st of April, because with this new vaccine coming out, there's a very good chance that we are going to turn a corner, and that would hopefully give people the opportunity. But there is a concern there, forgive us for our cynicism, but there is a concern based on past experience that we could be in a situation where you pass the handbook and there's not an awful lot we can do about it, like it or lump it. And so I would ask that it's not passed today, to allow for the discussion and with a view to implementing it on the 1st of April, which would be useful because it's beginning of the new tax year as well.
Nigel, I want to ask Tracy in a moment. Nigel, you were shaking your head. Nigel H, you were shaking your head there.
The trouble is, if we keep delaying it, we just keep delay. And the thing is, I'm slightly fed up with hearing about the vaccine, because yes, it might be the elixir, but it might not. If there's a mutation in this virus, this is not going to go away quickly. And therefore, in my opinion, it would be better to, this whole meeting is being screened. We're all on record as saying we'll take on board the changes that have been suggested, and if there is a way of adopting them, or if we cannot adopt them, then we won't. But we're all on record as saying we're prepared to listen and open further negotiation, and I therefore don't see any point in delaying. I think we should do as you've suggested.
Yeah, Tracy, could you come into that, please? Yeah, Georgie, I've seen your hand.
Yeah, it was just a comment from Mr. Heels about there being 80 comments about the handbook. Are those 80 comments all about statutory standards that we must pay regard to? Because if it's about the finer detail, the fundamental aspect should remain. It's about how that is done, and that discussion is open to the trade. So, like as an example, I mentioned about safeguarding training. That is an absolute requirement, but we can have a discussion on how we could work with the trade to make sure that works in the best possible way. So I think if there's any agreement to the handbook today, it's about, as a skeleton document, the framework is how it should be, and that the actual detail, if it almost like the practical side of it, is going to be discussed with the trade and other people in the meeting. Yeah,
agreed. Georgie, I'll come back to you, Duncan, and you as well, Mr. Heels. Georgie.
I don't really understand this as a solution, because it's inconsistent with what we've been discussing and agreeing. This is a really bad time for the taxi trade to be taking this on, taking the expense of the changes on. And I completely understand why they would not be very trusting that we would necessarily listen to them. I don't understand what the rush is. It's been 4 years. So why insist on doing it now in the middle of this pandemic? Why can't it wait till February? You know, we've waited 4 years.
Thank you. Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to suggest, and there seemed to be an element of consensus when we were discussing it, is that I fully agree this has been a large piece of work, and I thank the officers for getting it as far as this. And yes, the framework, as Tracy said, I think is there within a sense that the framework is complete. There are some elements to discuss and iron out, as has been said by many councillors. I would be content, therefore, with passing it today, subject to those amendments, working with the industry just to get it to a solution on some of the areas there are concerns about. That would give the industry and the council clarity. However, in any situation, I think we have to meet each other halfway, with the implementation of this coming forward on the 1st of April, which has been echoed, I think, by an officer and by the respective representatives from the industry. I think there we then have clarity for the industry, we have clarity for the council's hard work. We have, rest assured, these gentlemen and ladies who are in the taxi industry know what's coming. They can get through the Christmas period, which is going to be very, very difficult, knowing the implementation comes in April. And we then have pushed this piece of work not into the long grass, but we're actually firmly on the way to delivering it. But it then gives everybody the comfort I think they're seeking. So that would be my suggestion. Whether that's a proposal or not, we can come back to, Mr. Chairman, but that's what I would certainly like to suggest.
Okay, Emma Spagnola, I'll come back to you, Mr. Heels.
I'm actually agreeing with Duncan with this. I think in the middle of a COVID pandemic, where these people have lost money, we're now going to ask them to leave their posts, so to speak, for a meeting in the middle of this as well. I think when I came into the council, my huge thing was communication, and I'd like us to work alongside the taxi service to get to where we want to be. So although I agree that we need to have a cut-off point at some point, but I do believe that working together is going to get the best outcome for this.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, my proposal was to use this as a framework, but then to involve the association, which was Mr. Heels, and or one or two of the largest independent taxi firms who are not in the association, in order to sort of clarify and to finalise the concerns that they have, which then would be put into an addendum attached to the licensing framework. But that was my view. Mr. Heels.
If I could just come back to Tracy's comments earlier on, the association is fully aware of the statutory guidance that was released in 2020. We picked up on that sort of 2 days after it came out, and our report does reflect on that. If everybody reads through it, you'll see the questions with regards to the statutory guidance aren't that we don't want it. We know we have no choice. The questions are, we want to discuss with you how it's going to be implemented, so we can actually go back to our members and say, this is how it's proposed to be done, because we are getting questions about that. With regards to the majority, the larger operators, I have to say, out of our membership, we have, as Pierre said earlier on, we actually have all the large operators in North Norfolk already members, with the exception of one, which we spoke to on Friday evening. He said he'd come back to me, but he didn't, and I subsequently text messaged him on Saturday asking if he wanted to call. I was open to a discussion with him, and he didn't respond to me. So I have done my best to get all the large operators, but apart from him, everybody else who we classify as a large operator is already a member of our trade. So I feel we do represent a large swathe, along with individuals as well.
Thank you. Tracy, Pauline, please.
Thank you. I've just read the proposal put forward by Duncan, which I think seems quite sensible, Pierre. I think you should consider it. It's saying exactly what you say and what a lot of us agree with, that the skeleton, the bare bones of the handbook will be passed today. You will have discussions with the trade and with officers and with members who are involved. That's the three who dealt with the trade handbook, and that we have implementation in April, which is exactly what Tracy put forward. It sounds an eminently sensible idea. The sooner you have your discussions with the trade, the better, to stop this fiffing backwards and forwards.
Thank you, Pauline. Tracy, would you like to sort of conclude?
Yeah, it was just to say, if there is a decision to approve and look at an implementation from the 1st of April, is there the absolute urgency to go to full council in December to give the trade more time to have discussions with their members, and maybe we'll look at a February full council date. We won't delay any meetings with the trade, but just to give them the opportunity over the Christmas period to be able to do that.
Thank you. Right. Any other clarifications needed before Nigel Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that I was going to suggest a 1st of April implementation. I don't see any reason to rush this through now. I'm not saying the process won't be right, but I think how this will look from the industry, if we're seen to just rush it through today, I don't think it will look good. It will also, slight delay for implementation till April will give the industry time to get their head around it, make plans, budget, etc., etc. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel Housden.
Thank you, Pierre. We started this discussion off with Lara mentioning the Department for Transport and the need to have the implementation. Presumably, if we pass it in this way, we will have that implementation and therefore be conforming with the Department for Transport. Is that the case?
Lara, do you want to answer that or come back to that, please?
As far as I'm aware, Chair, the implementation, the Department of Transport have written into the statutory guidance that local authorities must have regard to the statutory guidance, and they would hope to see it implemented within 6 months of its date. So if we're looking to be slightly outside of that, I doubt the Department of Transport would have any issue.
Thank you. Right. What I would like to propose, therefore, is that we accept the document that we have in front of us as a framework for the handbook, and that it would be with further discussions with the trade and get their agreement and the fine details put into place, the handbook with the agreement of the trade would then go to full council in February, with implementation on the 1st of April 2021. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Okay, I'll take you Duncan, as the seconder, since you wrote to me privately here, or to everybody, I should say. Can we take a vote, please? Or those in favour? And those against? Any abstentions? Fine, that is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Heels, thank you for that. And your colleague as well. You can, do you want a final comment before you leave? You're on mute, Mr. Heels.
I'd just like to thank members for listening to us, and I think I can go back to our members and to our members of the association and give them what I consider to be a good way forward. So I look forward to meeting some of you at a meeting in due course. But thanks very much for that. That will be a big relief to a lot of people.
Thank you very much indeed. Team, obviously the task and finish group will work on this, but I would also open it to anybody else who would like to join us. But we'll discuss that offline. But obviously I'd like to see Harry, probably Emma, and a couple of others. I know you're probably too busy, Duncan, or Christopher might want to join, or Pauline. And obviously with officers, with Lara and Tracy as well, and Nigel Lloyd maybe. But I'll open that up afterwards. We'll discuss this anyhow. Thank you for that. That was quite an interesting and technical discussion, and I thank you very much for your support on that.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, does Steve Heels stay in on this?
No, Steve, can you? Thank you. Can you now log out, please, Steve? And thank you very much indeed for your input as well.
Okay, thank you, Pierre.
No problem. Thank you.
Very good discussion, Pierre, from all of you. It was interesting.
Yeah, and thank you. No, and thank you very much for your support as well, and everything else. It was a bit of a challenge, but I think we got round it in the end and came to a favourable conclusion. And at least I feel that we've moved forward on this rather than it's hanging around. So thank you very much indeed for that. Going on to item.
Pierre,
yes.
Pierre,
Yes.
Do we still need Duncan to have a word with the minister?
Yeah, why not? It'll give him a good excuse to talk to somebody new. So yes, please, Duncan.
I shall tell her we've made some excellent decisions in North Norfolk and we're going to be implementing it, but there's a little handbrake on it. She'll like that.
Yeah, okay, but thank you very much for that, Duncan. It is appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah. Going now on to item 8. Any other urgent business? Emma? Or Linda?
That I'm aware of, Chairman, no.
Exclusion of press and public, no need, the public has now gone. I presume there's no exempt matters arising from public business on the agenda.